guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Rizq podcast. This is episode 21. Today, we've got a very, very special guest. His name is Ibrahim Khan, and he's the co-founder of Islamic Finance Guru. So, Ibrahim, nice to have you with us.
Assalamu alaikum, Ehsan. It's an absolute pleasure to be on and looking forward to this. Everyone loves talking about themselves, right? So I'm looking forward to it.
That's it. You've been on this side of the chair many a time, questioning other people. So you know what, I thought it'd be good to get a bit of an understanding as to one of the two people who have founded Islamic Finance Guru, just to understand a bit about your journey. Just to kind of kick things off with a bit of context, Ibrahim, because I know it's always nice to know like how people find your work. I know that for myself as well. When people tell me, "Oh, I saw this," or "this person sent it to me," and it's always nice to know. So just to give you some context as to kind of how this came about, a friend of mine and I were talking about just personal finance and investment, and then he said, "Look, you should check these guys out. They're doing some really good work, mashallah." And so I did, and started looking at your content, and I think I guess I must have jumped on to your content at a good time, because you had gone kind of full time into Islamic Finance Guru as your business, and all that means is we get to get content from you guys a lot more regularly, and also the quality of your content, I think, as well, Ibrahim. Not to kind of just start this off with just throwing loads of compliments your way, but I think it's important just for people who might not know you, who are watching, just to kind of get a bit of a flavor for why I kind of even reached out to you, and it's for all of these reasons. And I think the most important reason as well, Ibrahim, and I do want to go into this, is above everything else, you're very credible, and I think that's important, and I'm sure you'd agree with that as well, that in this world, especially with internet and you're talking about money, there's so many people that are gurus, so many people that are financial gurus, and credibility is something that I think many people don't really understand, and don't really take into account too much. So that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on, Ibrahim, is to kind of ask you some questions about yourself, what you're doing with Islamic Finance Guru, and really get some value for people who are watching, to have some tips in terms of how to manage their own personal finances moving forward. So yeah, just to kind of kick things off, Ibrahim. So you've got this company called Islamic Finance Guru. What do you actually do?
Really good question. So our content was not so good at the start, and it slowly got better. So I think you definitely made a good choice in terms of when you joined and jumped onto our content. I guess Islamic Finance Guru started off as a labor of love in 2015, essentially just as a blog. So my background is I used to work as a corporate lawyer in the city in London. And I always knew that I wanted to do something for the community, Muslims in particular, and something to do with Islamic finance. It was always something in the back of my mind, even before university. And Islamic Finance Guru was one of the various things that we were doing. We were also, because I worked in venture capital, we were also investing in a lot of companies. I was volunteering with people like Mend and others in terms of, just providing pro bono legal work. And all of these things might sound quite disparate, but actually, in 2019, when we put IFG on a more commercial footing for the first time, it actually drew together really nicely. So IFG, I see it as, my life's work. I see it as all the different constituent parts of what I do coming together very nicely. And the core thing that we're trying to solve is a quarter of the world's population are Muslim, and yet they're 20% poorer than the rest of the world. And that has massive impacts on health outcomes, education outcomes, underrepresentation in the media, in politics, overrepresentation in prisons. Every single facet of our life is touched by the economics. And I want to solve that, right? I want to help Muslims get back to even keel. And we think that there's two key ways that you can do that. The one is helping every ordinary investor sort out their personal finances, find good, solid, credible investments to invest in, and just essentially get on top of their money. Then the other key solution is by helping Muslim and also minority founders get the capital they need to create the next big thing and make a name for themselves in the venture capital community. Because business more than anything moves the needle so quick. because one large business is worth, thousands of people in terms of, their personal finances. So we're working on dual stream there in terms of, both entrepreneurs, but also ordinary people. And on the entrepreneurial side, we've got IFG.vc, which is our angel syndicate, where you can invest in cool early stage startups. And because, alhamdulillah, because of our network, we're very lucky. We get to invest with all sorts of, really, really top quality investors. So we've invested with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We've co-invested in the same deals as the co-founders of Amazon, like Jeff Bezos, the co-founder of Zoopla. And it gives me a great deal of joy. It's almost like a kind of sticking it to the man kind of thing, which is like, ordinary investors, like a pharmacist from Bradford, gets to invest in the same company, sometimes actually ahead of people like the co-founder of Zoopla or, the co-founder of whatever. And what it shows is that, we're getting into really good deals, but we're also, for the first time, really opening that access up to Muslims, because these guys are not jokers. They're investing in these companies for a reason. And why should it just be them? Why can't it be other people? So that's what we do on the IFG.vc front. And on the Islamic Finance Guru front, it's, in a nutshell, it's just helping Muslims get in touch with halal investments, sort their money issues sorted, the bread and butter of, what you do with money, essentially.
Right. Okay. So it's almost like financial advice, financial planning, investments, kind of on steroids, because it's not only, it's almost like a financial incubator and hub for many different things, then, isn't it? Which I think is really interesting. Ibrahim, there's been a lot of people who present many ideas and pitch many ideas, and there's an interesting con. Okay, there's an interesting con called the Eiffel Tower con. I don't know if you've come across this before or not, but a man basically sold the Eiffel Tower for iron to a very wealthy person.
Right.
Now this man had no connection with the Eiffel Tower. He was conning the man. He took the money. The guy waited by the port for his iron from the Eiffel Tower, and lo and behold, it wasn't solved. And what happened was the individual actually repeated this con 2 or 3 times. Now, you have to ask the question, why is it that a person can get away with selling the Eiffel Tower 3 times, 4 times without getting caught? And the reason for that is because, or what he said, the reason for that is because people are too embarrassed to say that they've been conned. They're too embarrassed to say that they've been, duped or anything like that. Now, this same man wrote a book, and one of the, it's actually the 10 commandments of the con man. And one of the commandments that he put out was, and this is where it kind of comes back to the kind of the Islamic side of things, is whatever the religion of the person, whatever the religion of your prospect, pretend you're that. And we've seen this in many kind of societies and religions, and I think the Muslim community is extremely vulnerable to this type of salesperson or pitch or whatever it might be, however we term this. So I just want to kind of ask you a 2-layered question. One is, I know your background, but not everybody will open up your LinkedIn or do their research. So one is, what gives you credibility to actually say what you're saying, to work with these VCs, to take people's monies and invest it? And on the other side, and kind of in relation to that, is what do people need to look for and look out for when they're making these type of investments into these startup businesses, whether it's through IFG or whether they're going to like a community hall being pitched to? What are the things that they should be looking for?
Really good questions. And I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of, we get so many different people approach us. So we do these like community, basically 2-hour sessions on every Friday, which anyone can book into and just grab 10 minutes with me to talk about things. They're fairly popular. I think it's booked up till like the end of January now, I think. And what we find in those is every so often, probably every other session, we have someone who's lost all their life savings because of some, either con, or more often than that, just some numpty who, told them to put all their money into like Forex or something. And as a result of that, they've lost all their money. And it's just it's heartbreaking to hear that, but it's also infuriating that, this is the level of our personal finance education that we have as a community. So my background is, and I was actually quite, because I've always wanted to go into this kind of area, even as a kid, I knew this. I think a lot of my career has been designed to essentially give me the jigsaw puzzle pieces to be able to do what I do quite effectively. So I studied at Oxford. Mohsin, my co-founder, studied at Oxford as well. I did PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics. Then I did a master's in Islamic banking and finance. And I also started my Alim course at the same time. I'd done my Hifth and my Ijaza, and I'd studied in Egypt for a while, so that helped. And then I did my Alim course, and that continued basically for the next 6 years. Throughout my corporate career, I was also doing this. I trained at a law firm called Ashurst, which is one of the top 10 law firms in the UK. And then I worked at Debevoise and Plimpton, which is one of the top 3 private equity and venture capital firms in the world. And I think that whole experience, if you think about it, there's the Islamic law aspect, then there's the learning how to blog aspect with Islamic Finance Guru. There's the the economic and finance mainstream knowledge that you get from the degrees, and then also, of course, from the corporate law angle, you get such a wealth of really just practical information about how this stuff works, this arcane world, which most people don't know anything about, how all of these things actually work. So I think all of those things come together in what kind of content we produce, and for us it's about, for me, everything goes back to our mission in terms of helping Muslims get wealthier. And there are lots of other very big problems out there. It just happens that the big problem that we're helping to solve, we've just chosen one that we're suited to solve. There are other problems like spirituality issues and political issues. That's not what our forte is. So we leave that to people who are better than us. In terms of like things to watch out for, I've actually done an article on this today, as it happens, called "How to Invest Halal Without Losing All Your Money and Hair." And the idea is, how does a beginner actually, like, what are the things to look for when you're investing to make sure that you're not going to get, mullered with something which is inappropriate? The first thing to check is the investment company that you're investing in actually legit? The second thing to check is it halal or not? And the third thing is probably to just make sure that you are, now that you've got a list of hopefully halal and legitimate companies, to make sure you manage your portfolio in a way that doesn't end up, putting too much in one basket and then that basket exploding. So to break that down really specifically, then how do you actually check if a company is legitimate? So the kind of things that you should be looking at are, firstly, is the company regulated? Now, not all companies need to be regulated, so it's not a black mark if the company isn't, but the answer in what they say will in itself be a good indicator to you of how thoughtful they are about looking after their customers, and if they've actually even thought about that. The second thing is look at their track record and their experience. So check out their LinkedIn, check out their social media profiles, make sure that they are actually professionals and have experience in what they're purporting to invest in, rather than a fly-by-night operation which might look and has like a kind of snazzy website, but if you dig into it, there's no kind of substance there. And then I guess I would say that you look at their reviews online as well, because the reviews, obviously, these days, that you can get a whole load of fake reviews, but when you read a review, when you read a bunch of reviews, you get a really good sense of that company, and you can often pick out the fake ones quite easily, and they'll give you a really good sense of what other people think who have already experienced that company before. Then I would say that you should look at if the company is halal. So that's the second point. And the way you check that, I think there's probably 3 main ways. The first is look if it's actually Sharia certified, if it's got a legitimate scholar on board. And if you don't know who a legitimate scholar is, Google them and you'll find if they're legitimate or not, right? You'll get lots of views on them, or if they're present in many different boards of different financial institutions, that's often a very good sign. If that isn't the case, if they don't have official Sharia sign off, but they say that they're halal, then look at some neutral third party. For example, IFG. So, like, fundamentally, Islamic Finance Guru is just a big Islamic finance comparison platform, right? In a nutshell, that's what we do. And if, we and, people who are neutral and third parties who know what they're talking about are saying that this company is legitimate, they've done the due diligence, they've got a detailed review of the legal mechanisms behind the company, and someone is comfortable with them, then that's a good indicator. And this is often the case with a company that may not necessarily like be targeting Muslims from an investment perspective. So they don't like officially say that they're Sharia compliant, but actually everyone knows that they're Sharia compliant who is in the industry. And then the third category, where perhaps we don't cover them, and they're not Sharia certified, they've just come out of the blue to you. It might well be a legitimate investment, but what you should do is you should consult with a trusted Islamic scholar on that. And you should be trusting an Islamic scholar, not just who's your local scholar, but someone who has ideally experience in financial matters. And that's not everyone. You need to be like, you need to have a sense of if they have that expertise. And people like, Sheikh Haytham, Sheikh Abu Isa, Sheikh Mufti Faraz, Mufti Bilal, all of these guys, Mufti Zubair, Al Qalam, the Sharia panel. There's a lot of them out there now who have good experience in these matters, and you can actually ask the muftis that we work with, Mufti Faraz Adam and Mufti Bilal Umarji, on the IFG forum.islamicfinanceguru.com. You can just ask them completely for free any questions that you have around finance, and they'll usually get back to you within a day or two. So those are kind of, I think, the things to watch out for. And then I guess the final thing I'd say is diversify your portfolio. Even if you're happy that the company or the thing that you're investing in is legitimate and it's halal, don't put all your money into it, because it being legitimate and halal doesn't mean that it's not going to have the risk of losing money. So you always want to spread your risk across different asset classes and across different companies and investment categories as much as you can, because that way you hedge yourself against losing everything.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. So I just wanted to kind of, I know that in terms of some of the people that I've spoken to about this interview, they mentioned that the work that you do is incredible, and I think in what you were saying as well, what's really special is that your focus really is on improving the Muslim community, and having that focus on Sharia compliance. Are all the investments that you do Sharia compliant, or are they also secular ones which are just not haram as well? Is that what you focus on as well? Or is it completely in the Islamic sector?
It's everything that Muslims can invest in.
Okay.
So that's stuff that is like, it's like halal chicken. It explicitly says it's halal, or it could be I don't know, like digestive biscuits, for example, or something.
Yeah.
Which, like, they don't say they're halal, but like it's obvious it's halal.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Fine. Excellent. All right. Cool. Just wanted to clarify that as well. So, just kind of moving forward now. I know I saw one. I think it was on one of your webinars that you were doing with Mohsin, and it seemed to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me as though that was it's quite a good balance between someone who's more riskier and someone who's a bit more kind of risk adverse, if that's the right way of saying it. Because I think you were talking to Mohsen about his trades that he does, his daily trades and his swings and stuff like that. So one thing that I've kind of come to terms with and learned myself is about having balance in your investments. The way that I see it is that when I do any type of investing into a single stock or single share, it's there are the long-term ones as well, there are the short-term ones, whatever it might be, but I kind of look at that as a bit of fun, and then I have my longer-term investments, which are my actual savings. So what do you like? Are you an aggressive poker player, or are you quite patient? What's your risk taste, your risk appetite?
Sure. So, our personal risk appetite, me and Mohsin's, is very, very high. So, you kind of have to be if you're going to, pack it all in and join a startup, right?
Mm.
So we're both just approaching 30 now, and we've got a mortgage and kids and a family,
Mm.
and we've both walked away from, alhamdulillah, six-figure jobs. If anyone basically who works in the city and ends up with one of those, and we've jumped ship, and we've gone to I guess like the lowest kind of salaries that you can get to make this startup work. And for us, it's never really been about the money. It's more about the mission, and it's about why we do what we do. And
Mm.
inshallah, like, if IFG succeeds, which it will, we'll make money inshallah as well as a result of that. But I guess to answer the question, if you're that kind of person, then you're already fairly, like, risk friendly. But what I would say is that we're very controlled in how we take those risks. So, the YouTube video, for example, that I released last night about, how the career change and how that whole thing happened, it's a risky move,
Mm.
but it was very, very controlled in terms of how we did it. So I made sure that I got myself an Islamic mortgage, and it was at a rate that was affordable, so that it wouldn't cause problems later on, and actually be able to get a mortgage whilst you're gainfully employed. And you plan it out, and you raise money if you want to. So you take those steps in a controlled way so as to mitigate the risk. But in terms of, like, the pure investment approach, um, you know we're very cautious in terms of what we tell people to do, because we know what people are like when they read things and they hear things, which is they get very, very excited about stuff, and then they'll make, impulsive decisions based, like, so if you say to someone you can make 15, 20, 30% returns,
Mm.
uh, they get very excited. They'll put all their money into that, but that's not sensible for most people to do. And so we're very cautious in terms of what we actually put out there, in terms of what people should be doing. So it's a very interesting question, because, like, honestly, what my personal approach to, I don't actually do what I say that you should do, because what we say other people should do is fairly cautious, and we want to look after them. Whereas what we do is, I think a lot of our money goes into either stocks or startups.
Mm.
And that's obviously an incredibly high risk approach. And I think as we gain money, gain assets over time, over in a decade's time, I think it'll start switching. So we'll start doing much more, much more into property, for example, and we'll start thinking about other things to look into. But yeah, I think it very, very much depends in terms of who you are as a person, and
Mhm.
how sophisticated, frankly, you are as an investor as well. So, like, if you don't know what a wakala note is, or you don't know how derivatives work, then you're probably not a sophisticated investor. And if you're not a sophisticated investor, then you just need to be careful with what you're getting into, because if you don't know what you don't know, then
Mm.
it's very, I think it's a risky thing to be going into things, in that situation. But if you do know, and you take an educated guess, and it works out, it doesn't work out, at least, like, at least you know what you're doing.
Mm. Absolutely, absolutely. I just want to touch on something that you mentioned actually about that transition period itself. Um, like you said, you started IFG back in 2015. You had a corporate job which was paying the bills, and like you said, when you work in the city, these are the kind of the badge of honors that we get. I have this salary and I work for this company, and that type of prestige, and I know, personally speaking, that Pakistani people in particular, I don't want to make a generalization of all Muslims, but Pakistani people in particular, um, and families, they tend to pin their pride and joy on these titles and these badges of honors. One thing that we don't celebrate is entrepreneurship. That is, why are you doing that? That's scary. That's unstable. Lots of risk. And the sad part is, you could do better than me. So these are all the reasons why other people don't like their close ones going into entrepreneurship. So and you gave some advice actually on that, which I thought was a very excellent, actually, just in terms of preparing, planning, and almost conditioning everybody like slowly over time. Just talk to me a bit about that. Like, when did you think, I mean, even starting IFG, then, like, why did you start IFG? And at what point did you think that, okay, I want this to be the vehicle for, my income and my life, and et cetera, et cetera?
So, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to do my own thing, even like when I was 16, 17. And, and I always knew that I'd probably go into professional life and it would be a stepping stone to doing something else. And that like really helped, I think, because you set things up as you go along as a result of that, rather than like thinking you're going to have a great career and then it randomly happens that you get fired or something and then you have to go into like business. So I think that was helpful. We set up IFG back in 2015, and at the time we kind of like vaguely thought maybe one day we might try and like make some money off it. But at that point, it was literally just a blog, and we thought, we just enjoy this stuff and we'll just carry on with this. And it was, I guess, in January 2019 where it became a lot more serious for us about, let's, actively now, both of us are, qualified solicitors. We know that we want to leave within the next 2 years,
Mhm.
and we kind of set ourselves a timeline of, December 2020, December 2020, actually, the end of this year, to pack it in. And and within 9 months of us really like trying properly, we'd realized that this is kind of a bucking bronco, and the train is leaving the station and we're either on it or we're not. uh, and there were moments where I was on phone calls at the same time from both work and IFG, in a tube, and it's just like you get like a certain point where the business and the extracurricular becomes much bigger than the business. It becomes much bigger than the main job.
Mm.
And that's probably the point where you have to flip the switch and take the plunge. And it's always going to be scary, and there's always going to be a point where you need to get relevant people comfortable.
Mm.
But what you do is you work out who the key stakeholders are in that decision, and who may not be comfortable. Like in my case, my parents are very comfortable. They've always been very supportive. I mean, they're not business people themselves, but they've always been very supportive, and they understand that for the Muslim community to do well, Muslims need to go in business as opposed to stay in professional services, because there's always a cap on that. Whereas with business, it's kind of go big or go home, right? I might end up a complete flop. IFG may completely flop. I would expect it not to, inshallah, but there is that potential. Whereas with being a dentist, or a doctor or a lawyer, there isn't really that potential. You always find something to do.
Mm.
So they're bought into that, which is quite lucky for me, I guess. My wife has seen people in her family do business well and not so well, and I think she needed a bit more comfort. So I think if you talk to them and work out what exactly comfort they need, you'll get a kind of roadmap of these are the things to tick off, and
Mm.
then they've got the comfort they need, and they'll back you as well. And I think all, alhamdulillah, all of my family have been very, very supportive. On Mohsin's side, he's from a family of entrepreneurs, so they were very supportive from the start, and I guess they continue to be supportive as well. So I don't know if that's been at all helpful, but that's kind of a meandering take on the logistics of us, I guess,
No,
leaving.
no, absolutely. Because you know what it is, a lot of people, that is something that affects a lot of people. Because we're talking about mentality and anxieties and all these types of things about making a decision. And I think what's important from what you said is the fact that you had a plan, you had traction, and it got to a point where you literally had to make a decision of which phone call do I take. And I think for anyone who started anything, you always want to go with the thing that you've started. There's a passion behind that, and I think and that's important. And like you said as well, just educating everybody about what's happening and understanding what are the minimum basic requirements that we need to have in terms of finances for us to be happy. And then, can I achieve that through my side income? Does my side hustle achieve that? If it does, then great, let's scale this. So no, I think that's very valuable. I had a
One
few.
thing, am I all right to add
Yeah,
something?
yeah, go for it, go for
So
it.
I think one thing to add to that is, like, I think it's often these days, especially, quite sexy
Hmm.
to be an entrepreneur and do
Yeah.
this thing. So like, I think it's very, very important for people to not become entrepreneurs for the sake of that title,
Mm,
right? It's not about the title. It's it, I think ultimately it comes down to the why you do it. If you are, it's hard being
mm,
a business founder because you are often creating a new marketplace, or often creating, a new way of thinking about things, and you're probably going to get ignored and no traction, and fail for possibly months if not years. And uh, and you can only get through that if it's, if it's less about the brand of being an entrepreneur and feeling nice, and the label of it, and more about actually caring about what you are doing,
mm,
because that's really what matters. And I guess the kind of really successful founders that we found and invested in, I've either been really mission driven, so it's not like they would like to succeed, it's that they need to succeed
mm,
because this is what it's about for them. And also other founders who are very problem driven. So we've invested in a construction augmented reality construction headsets, which help large construction companies essentially see what the finished product looks like in front of them. Now it's hard to become like really passionate about that, I guess, but you can definitely see how achieving that will make the lives of many people easier. It will make things safer. It will make things quicker. It will help deal with the UK's housing shortage. It will disrupt an industry where things have, there are obvious problems, but no one has ever solved them. So there are lots of things that you can get
mm,
passionate about, and you are very much problem solving oriented, and you really take joy and benefit in that, and that comes across. Whereas the worst kind of founders are people who are like, oh, this is like a big kind of hot area right now. So I don't know, something like bringing artificial intelligence or machine learning into basically anything, or automotive things like cars
stick
or
a blockchain in
scooters, stuff
something.
like that. Yeah, or there's loads of that. Fintech, for
Mm,
example, is a big one. Everyone seems to have a fintech these days with a nice, colorful card. It's very easy to do. Now, the problem there is that when you're being pitched that, people haven't, they haven't really done their research. They don't really understand what the consumer wants, and they've started from, this is the solution, where can we fit that onto, rather than, this is a burning need of someone, let's solve that. Right? They haven't, and even when they say that they're talking to consumers, are they actually talking to consumers, or are they just being very selective about the things that they want to hear to give them what they have to give them? Right? Because if that's the case, then there's, I guess, no point talking to consumers. So I guess my advice to sum it all up is probably two things. One is, don't just go into entrepreneurship and like, the self-reliance world, thinking it's all going to be hunky-dory,
mm,
and thinking that it's great for the brand, and what have you, and the lifestyle. And the second thing I would say is, the thing that you should be quitting for, particularly as Muslims, I think it needs to be very mission driven. It doesn't have to be, you're quitting to create a Quran app, for example, or Islamic finance guru. It doesn't have to be like Islamic, because not every Muslim needs to do something Islamic. But if you are, you know, if you are deeply passionate about something and you link that back to your core purpose as a Muslim, then that's super helpful. Like someone who creates the next Google, for example, which is better than Google in some way, shape, or form. And you kind of identify, so the amount of power that a company like Google has is incredible, right?
Mm.
And you say that you see the issues with what that power does to a company like Google, and who that benefits and who it doesn't benefit. Um, Now, if you come along and you say, look, I want to create an alternative which is better, then and you're very mission driven about it, that becomes really, really compelling. It becomes something that gets you out of bed every morning without necessarily, having to, think too hard, or, drive yourself to do it.
Absolutely, and I can attest to that as well. Because when you're doing something that you're not passionate about, you're just forever pushing that boulder up the hill. And business is like that anyway. Entrepreneurship is like that anyway. You're constantly pushing this boulder up the hill, and if you don't even like kind of where you're going and what everything looks like around you, I mean, it's a bit of a disaster. So that's an interesting take on entrepreneurship, actually, because actually what you're saying is entrepreneurship should be a result of trying to solve a problem, and that problem being so burning inside of you that it needs your full time and attention, and there's already customers there that are requesting this, they're paying you for this thing anyway. So it should be almost like a natural transition from one to the other. So I think that's very, very powerful, and I think what you're saying is going to save a lot of people a lot of heartache, because yes, a lot of people like to jump into things, leave somewhere to go somewhere. And then the reality of entrepreneurship is that, people don't want to pick up the phone, when you call, like,
Yeah.
that's just how it works. So
And
I
not
think that,
everyone is suited for it either, right?
mm,
That's also just a very, very
absolutely.
frank statement. Like, there's a reason why most people are employees, and most people and some people are employers. It's not because employees are better in some way, shape, or form. It's just because some people are wired differently,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and that's fine. You can be a great Muslim and great person as an employee. You don't have to become an employer, but if you do, then make sure that it's right.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think what's important as well is because like we're saying, culturally we have a more of an employee mindset. The business model, if you will, the financial model for most of us is, something that was great 20 years ago, great 30 years ago, but actually the economy now, that model isn't that great anymore. I hope that makes sense what I just
Yeah,
said. But
yeah.
yeah, I think that's great. We've only got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to just ask, this is a huge question, probably need a whole interview just on this question, but why not ask it for the last 5 minutes? You were talking about in one of your videos, when you go into a new company, or if you're already working for a company, you should be able to have an option for halal pension, things like this. Not specifically on this question, but just generally, when do you think Sharia compliant or Islamic banking, or the principles of Islamic banking, will be adopted mainstream in the West?
Probably never, because it comes back to the customers, right? If
Mm,
Muslim, I mean, I guess if you listen to the right wing, then Muslims will be the majority by 2050 or something. I'm not sure that's the case, but I think they're actually onto something there. Ultimately, I think Sharia compliance and Sharia compliant banking will only become much more of a thing as the Muslim community increases in size.
mm,
So it doesn't make sense for HSBC to provide this additional facility for 5% of the population, who probably will use HSBC anyway, even if if they don't have the halal option. Whereas if the Muslim community is now 15, 20% of the population, which it could be by 20, 40, 50. I mean, I don't know about 20%, but maybe like 15%, I think, are the projections by 2050 or so. Um, in that scenario, I could see people, pretty much every bank, saying, you know what, let's just cater for this 1/5 of the population
mm.
that is now adhering to Islam. And I think that's where it will come down to, in terms of how the mainstream will start using Islamic finance, because otherwise, for them to choose Islamic finance and Islamic investments as an alternative to mainstream, I think it's just too big an ask.
Mm.
There's too much rewiring to do, and it's just not going to happen unless they care about it. Like why would they change everything if they don't believe in Islam? I just don't think it's going to happen.
No, absolutely. No, I think you hit the nail on the head on what you're saying in terms of just the normalization of Islamic banking in banks will only be driven by the demand, and I think that is actually very poignant for just society in general. That society won't change, people won't change unless there's a demand for that to happen in anything, whether it's fruit being sold in Dubai from certain countries or whatever it might be. It's only going to change if people and us as Muslims demand that change.
Yeah.
Uh, Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So, um, Ibrahim, bro, thank you so much for your time. I really, really do appreciate you giving me some of your time on this interview, middle of the day. I know that we're coming to the end of how much time we do have, so just a big thanks to you, bro. And before we do leave, is there anything about IFG that maybe we haven't touched upon that you think is important for people to know? Yeah.
I think we've touched on a lot. I just say probably subscribe to our email list, islamicfinanceguru.com/subscribe, or just go on any of our pages and you'll find a subscribe button somewhere, because that way you just are in the loop in terms of what we're up to.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the best kind of education is actually the drip education.
Mm-hmm.
And most people find that rather than hitting them with a book or something, if you are just part of, like, passively just part of this community for a couple of months, you'll just pick up so much stuff automatically. That'll be really helpful.
And actually, Ibrahim, one last question. You've only got less than a minute to answer it, and it's again another big topic. But just to kind of encapsulate things for people that are already subscribed to IFG, or new subscribers that will join you today or whenever they watch this podcast. What's the future of IFG? Why should people care?
It's not really about the future of IFG. It's about the future of the Muslim community as a whole, and it's about your own finances, right? If you're someone who has had bad experiences with investing, has lost money, or it has money but is just sitting there, being eaten away by inflation, you clearly need to do something about it. And if you don't care about Islam, then fine, just you can go on the internet and find lots of people who will talk about that. If you do care about Islam and Sharia compliant investing, and also importantly impact as well in terms of what happens with your money, then I think we're probably one of the only people who are speaking about that in the UK, but actually globally as well. And the reason why you should care, and I think it's a moral, if not an Islamic obligation for someone to get on top of their finances, is because you will die and your money will be inherited by your inheritors, and there will be a difference of, like, if you invested versus you didn't invest, maybe instead of inheriting 500 600,000, you might inherit 300,000, right? And fine, that's impactful for your family, but ultimately they'll be fine. But the big impact is that 50% or that 40% that you've lost. Now imagine if all the Muslim community is doing that, right? And in a lifetime we have literally halved our potential wealth. And if you do that, then do not complain if you don't see Muslims represented in media or politics, or you see that your kids are reading J.K. Rowling instead of any Muslim, Muslim writer, or you see that there's no Muslims in Hollywood apart from the baddies. Don't complain about that. It's all related to your finances. Like, who do you think is creating those films and doing that stuff? It's Netflix, it's Amazon, it's Disney. These are all companies and startups once. And if you're not making your money invested in things that will create a better future, then there's nothing to really complain about. Either you stay silent and move on, or you do something about it. And I would obviously urge everyone to do something about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just to kind of touch upon that example as well, that when there is that loss isn't lost in thin air. It's going somewhere, and it's not going to the Muslim community. It's going to whatever other community owns the banks or owns whatever. So, the money's going from yourself and your family and your whoever to somebody else. It's not just going anywhere. So why not keep that and grow that for things that will help the community, inshallah. So
Like candidly, I actually don't care about, my own wealth or anyone's wealth. Like, it's good for them.
mhm,
I care about the Muslim community as a whole and our
mhm.
position in the world. That's why I want you to get great wealth and kick on and become a great business leader, etc. That's why. It's because of the wider benefit you have to the community. You as an individual, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you rizq. You'll survive. You'll be fine. But I actually think that the reason why I do this and get out of bed every morning is that wider impact that doing this has.
Potential, isn't it?
Yeah,
That lack of potential that we currently have, filling that gap, isn't it?
exactly.
Awesome. Bro, thank you so much for your time. I'm pretty sure that I'm going to get a lot of people after this asking me more questions to pass on. So maybe, inshallah, in a few months' time or whatever, we can link up again, inshallah, and go a bit
For
deeper.
sure.
So thanks so much for your time. And what I'll do is I'll take some links off of you, put them in the description, and then if people want to follow, subscribe, and learn more about what you guys do, they can do that using those links, inshallah.
Brilliant. Sounds good. It's been a pleasure, Ehsan.
No, my pleasure. Thanks so much, Ibrahim, and we'll talk soon. Take care, bro.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.